Many times we don't understand the difference between conformed and transformed. You see what I'm saying? I can transform what I wear. You see what I mean? I can transform even to a certain degree what I look like. But my moral standards are not going to transform. If anything, they would have to conform for me to sell out. Because in order for me to conform, I now have to start believing in that system. And that's when I start to go and promote to my people the most important thing. Because let's look at it. How did they get us? They got us when they started. Let's talk about the bag.
Yeah.
Now everything is based behind getting the bag by any means. Malcolm X said, by any means necessary. What he was talking about really at that time had nothing to do with getting a bag. It was more about protecting yourself.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? And then when they opened the doors and flooded that into every conversation, now you seeing every rap song, a whole bunch of commercials came out. I got to get it by all means, any means. I got to get this bag no matter whatever. Get rich or die trying. That ain't something 50 Cent made up. You see what I'm saying? So when you start to talk about the difference between transform and conform, you're actually believing that this is the way, and it doesn't matter who it hurts while you're in the process of conforming. I said this, and this is gonna piss a lot of Israelites off, because the it's going around that ask not what your country can do for you, but what you could do for your country. Well, what oppressor said that? And what nation said that? And what was the influence, what was the pain that came from behind that? You see what I mean? So I would never align myself with somebody who would use an affirmation from a slave master to control me. Because in that same affirmation of ask not what your country can do, they also ask you not to think, just do. You see, when you go to the military, they tell you don't think, just go out and fight. Well, you think about how many people went into the military not thinking about what's going to happen when they got in the military. They just jumped to get out of one situation, and the only situations they had coming in the 40s and 50s was to go to the military. If I was facing prison time and I could go into the military to get away from that, I'd jump in there and get it.
Yeah, they did that all the way up to about the 80s.
Yeah, a lot of that happened. And then you look at the dysfunction of those individuals who went to the military, who, again, since we're talking about education, I could go to the military, get me a education in the military, but what they didn't tell you is none of those jobs, 95% of the jobs that's in the military are not in the community.
No.
So you went in there, you conformed to that, you learned how to kill, you couldn't turn it off, they drugged you, they kept you drunk, and then when they released you to come back out, and you realize, well, I can't go fly AWACS in the community, especially in the black community. I can't go drive a tank in the black community. I can't go do any of that. So now I'm stuck and I'm hooked on drugs, and I have a mental health disorder that I can't turn off. And now they expect me to come back into the community and be normal when there's no opportunities in the community. So again, by me not thinking or by me reacting rather than responding, I find myself into a situation to where I force myself to believe there's no other way for me to act but to turn internal on the people who look like me. And that's when you've been bamboozled, but you took the bait and you sold out. But we're gonna get further into it. Go ahead. You was gonna say something. Go ahead. We're gonna get deeper into this tonight.
John F. Kennedy is the one who said, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Mm-hmm. And at the time, a lot was going on. There was murmurs about Vietnam and then the Cold War. And then they just got done with the Korean War. not too long after he said that.
But let's look at this though.
I mean, before he said that,
right? We had a North and a South Korean, right?
Yeah, the Korean War.
Korean War
was
okay. Same way with Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And plus Fidel Castro.
Exactly. But here's the point I'm making. You had America behind one, Russia behind the other.
Correct.
Okay. So you had two major countries, if not the top two major countries, supplying each side with their military, what do you call that?
Power. Backing.
Whatever.
Allies.
Okay, but they became allies, but basically they're using both of those countries to test out their military stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying? And this is the way they do. They keep us at each other. Here's the thing. They keep us at each other. Well, they kept them at each other. We'll go all the way around this tonight, okay? Because we're gonna go into this. They keep each other going. Those two countries didn't realize that all they were doing was annihilating each other just so America and Russia could see that their military bombs and things were actually working. Because the people that are left over, they'll throw the money in there to help rebuild it. But in our case, when we're at war with each other, they don't put no money into our community for us to rebuild. Go ahead.
Yeah. Now, just so everybody's up with us on what we're talking about, he's referring to the Korean War. North Korea was funded by the Russians. South Korea was funded by the Americans. And North Korea was funded by the Russians and the Chinese. Because remember, the Chinese were allies with North Korea. They've always been allies with North Korea.
Exactly.
And so when Korea went into civil war, that's what happened. That's what he's referring to. And after the war, America took them, because South Korea has been a third world country since about the 80s.
Right.
Maybe the mid 90s, they started coming up. It was a third world country.
Mm-hmm.
Let alone, North Korea is still a third world country. You see what I'm saying? So that what he's saying is exactly true. You had the Soviet Union at the time, and then the United States of America. Same thing with Germany after World War II. They have East and West Germany.
Yeah.
Soviet Union and whoever else, and then America and Britain for this side. Tear down the Berlin Wall. Mm-hmm. What's your man from Baywatch?
I don't even watch Baywatch.
That's the dude who was like, tear down the wall when they was tearing it down.
Yeah.
Your boy from Baywatch. I forget his name.
David Hasselhoff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I just happen to remember him being on it. I don't watch it per se.
Yeah.
But getting back to the point, because we're talking about this selling out in education. You think about this. When a person comes out of high school, and I'm only going to deal with our community, there's no career avenue. Normally, let's just be realistic. A lot of our kids back in the 70s and 80s, it was a known thing to go to Votech or the Job Corps.
Right.
It was a known
or
thing.
The military.
Or the military. Those were your three things that you knew, because a lot of that stuff dealt with more hands-on vocational type of things. You know what I'm saying? So it wasn't a push for that, because you had plumbers, you had electricians in the 70s and 80s. You had those types of jobs available. But then all of us, we'll say the 60s and 70s. But when the 80s hit and you started to see the whole change came about, more men went into prison. No men were coming out of prison with degrees. So rehabilitation starts with education, how you think. So when you go into prison, you do 15, 20 years, and in there, you don't learn nothing but how to be an animal. When you come back and you in the jungle, you're going to act predatory. And so what had happened is that there were a lot of men that came, but like I said, that went in the 60s and 70s, they were getting degrees. And the complaint by the white people, because that's really what it was, and then blacks started to pull on in with it. They was convinced that that's what was actually going on, that the people coming out of prison was taking all the jobs, which was a lie. That was not the case, because most of the guys that went in were coming back. I mean, you'd have some counselors, but you have more guys that were mechanics. You have more carpenters. They were doing jobs that was more hands-on type of jobs. They were not doing the clerical jobs and things like that, computer jobs, because we still wasn't in a computer age at that time. All right. So that's the way it started to happen in the early 80s. They started to take that out of there to where guys, okay, hey man, they have a few programs set up for you in the prison. You know, maybe some substance abuse, some 12-step groups or whatever, a few mental health groups and things like that. You could maybe get a certification with a few things, but as far as you getting a degree, they wipe that out. So now the person that went in with this thinking error, he sits up in there, and it's a whole different. If I'm not being educated in the prison to come out to be successful, I'm being institutionalized in the prison to bring that institutionalization out of the prison back into the community. That's why when you see these apartments that we complex that we call low income housing apartments, they have this black fence around there.
That's right.
And then in this black fence, these guys coming out of prison, man, this is my hood. It's cool to be behind the fence because they've been behind the fence for the last 15, 20 years. They see no different. And now you bring that into those communities, and then you have the same thing being taught to those kids in the community. So when a kid has to go to jail for committing a crime, he don't see no different because he's been behind bars all his life. And those people that come out of prison who are not any more educated as far as how to deal with society and the society norms have now just institutionalized our community. One way you can see that is snitching. Now, what snitching is in the penitentiary is totally different what snitching is in the community. And there's really no snitching in the community because society norms are totally different from what's in the penitentiary. In a penitentiary, a person who snitches to somebody that tells to advance their situation. When a person reports something in the community, it's because they're victimized.
Right.
So, and you see what I mean when I say institutionalization comes from the prison industry into the community. Because now, what's the saying? Snitches get stitches.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Correct.
And you have kids to this day believe that so heartily that they would damn near kill you behind it if they don't. Mm-hmm. You got a lot of kids that are living out the gangster life of what some of their so-called ancestors talked about. Not ever did, but talked about. You hear guys that are going in there talk about, man, I did 20 years and did this and that. The only difference is nowadays, these kids are saying, well, you know what? I'm not going to go. If I go and do the crime and you told me to do the crime and then you leave me hanging, I'm not going to go do the time by myself. And what's pissing off a lot of the older cats is they say, well, man, did nobody make you do it? Yeah, you made him do it. You just don't want to do the time. Now he's doing the time and you want to abandon that. And that's a part of brotherhood we'll get into a little later on at another time and day. But we're going to stick with this. So education at that time was pivotal, just the same as it is now. But the problem is that they started to look down on education, and and what was forced into our communities is that it's okay to be ignorant.